I am as certain as you can be that the Cincinnati Reds will acquire Eugenio Suárez before the MLB trade deadline passes.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. Hello, my name is Jeff Carr. I'm a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan, and I have been podcasting about this team now for my 7th straight season. I'm glad that you're alongside us here today. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day. And on today's show, this is actually going to be a little bit of a bonus episode. Steve and I will be in your feed Monday around lunchtime as we dissect the Rays series, what it means for this Reds team, the amazing sweep that they just had, and we look ahead at the Dodgers series, specifically what we can expect from Chase Burns. Make sure you check us out there. But this episode, I want to focus solely on the Eugenio Suárez trade rumors because this MLB trade deadline is hot right now. A lot of moves are happening. Eugenio Suárez is not one of them, and I believe that's because the Reds have like a 90% chance. I'm 90% sure, I think, that the Reds are going to trade for Eugenio Suárez. I'm going to lay out the reasons why. I got 6 reasons, 7 if you include a couple of things that the Reds did that I think have led into all of this. And later on, I want to look at a trade package that was proposed and why I think we need to be okay with that sort of a deal. That's all coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast, and I'm glad that you're alongside me here today. Again, this is a little bit of a bonus edition. It'll be a little bit shorter than a typical episode, but I really wanted to hash this out separate from dissecting the Reds' win over the Rays because Steve and I have a lot to say about that, but I also have a lot to say about the Suarez rumors because I believe that I'm 90% sure here that the Reds are going to land Suarez because of all of these signs. And okay, maybe 10% of that is just the fact that I keep thinking about this, right? A little bit too much. And so maybe it's like 80% sure, but still, I am very sure. Well, let me lay out these reasons for you. The first one, of course, is the one that we talked about this past week, the mutual interest article that C. Trent Rosecrans put out in The Athletic. He didn't just tweet it. He didn't just say it. He didn't go on somebody's radio show and drop a little nugget in there. C. Trent wrote an article about this. And he did that whenever the Reds were about to acquire Brady Singer. Somebody we'll talk a lot about on Monday afternoon show, Steve and myself. But whenever they acquired Brady Singer for Jonathan India. And he did it a few days ahead of time. There were some other reports, quote unquote, that made it seem as though C. Trent might not be on the case as much as he is, but it's so rare that you see somebody who reports on the team involved looking to acquire said amazing player make this report. Because typically what you see is people within the organization, within the Diamondbacks organization in this example, leaking information to try to drum up a bidding war, try to fire up the other side. And quite frankly, there's a little bit of that going on, which is one of the reasons that I'm so bullish about the Reds trading for Eugenio Suárez. But this article from C. Trent Rosecrans really has me liking it. And it started off my intense fixation with the Reds making this trade. The second reason that I believe Eugenio Suárez will ultimately end up a Cincinnati Red before 6 p.m. on this coming Thursday is because the Yankees have already made their trade for a third baseman. The Yankees might actually be the most third base desperate team in the major leagues. They had a horrible situation at third base. They were trying to put anybody they could out there, and it wasn't working for any of them. And they went and they traded for Ryan McMahon from Colorado. They saw the market for Eugenio Suárez, and they didn't like it. They didn't like their chances. They didn't like how much they were going to have to bid, things like that. They said, nah, we don't want none of that. And that was one of the big teams that some of the national reporters said, oh, yes, without a doubt, Eugenio Suárez is going to end up there. They were saying Yankees or Mariners. Well, the Yankees already went and got somebody. And they got a couple of other people on top of that. They got Ahmed Rosario from the Washington Nationals and all that good stuff. So they have forgotten about Suarez. They're not in the runnings anymore. That's reason number 2. The third reason that I'm really excited about the Reds' chances to land a Eugenio Suárez this trade deadline is because rumors have begun heating up again about somebody taking Nolan Arenado off of the St. Louis Cardinals' hands. The Cardinals were begging anybody this past offseason, anybody, take this dude off their hands. Now, he does have a no-trade clause that he has to waive, and that's a big reason why he isn't a Houston Astro right now, because there were a lot of reports that the Cardinals had a deal in place to send Arenado to Houston, but he didn't want to go there. And now that the Yankees are off the table, I'm not really sure where Arenado's going, but there are a lot of rumors going on around that Nolan Arenado's trade interest has begun to rise again amongst other teams in the league. The Reds are not one of those teams. The Reds are not being reported in a whole lot of other rumors. The only other rumors that I've seen them in are for either one of the Minnesota Twins' awesome relievers, Juan Duran or Griffin Jax. And there were rumblings about Luis Robert Jr. earlier on in the year, but those have stopped. Reportedly, the White Sox just want way too much for him. They want Mark Vientos from the New York Mets. Reportedly, the Mets are really in on Luis Robert, but the White Sox are saying, nah, it's got to include Mark Vientos, who is the current starting third baseman for the New York Mets, not a prospect. So anyway, I digress on that. The whole thing with this, the fact that Nolan Arenado has re-entered the chat, is because people are looking for solutions not named Eugenio Suárez. Now, that probably means that there are 2 or 3 finalists for Suarez, and ironically, a lot of reports are they are the Reds, Cubs, and Brewers. The National League Central, basically, wants a Eugenio Suárez. But the Chicago Cubs currently have a rookie third baseman on a heater in Matt Shaw, and the Brewers, I don't think, can outbid the Reds in a trade. I think that the Reds have a really good offer, and we'll discuss that here in a little bit, what it could be, that I think would knock anybody else out of the running. And I would be okay if they made that offer. But that being said, I think that there are a lot of different things that fall into point number 4 as to why I think the Reds acquire Suarez, which is why it's where I've gone from hopeful to very excited, because national reporters are reporting that there are, this team is the most aggressive team, or this team absolutely can't live without him, or, things like this. Like Hector Gomez reported after Alec Boehm hit the IL for the Philadelphia Phillies, their third baseman. Hector Gomez reported that the Philadelphia Phillies will, quote, do whatever it takes to land Suarez. Mike Rodriguez, who is a guy who covers Major League Baseball, does a lot of different Spanish reports and things like that, he reported that the Cubs are, quote, pursuing a Eugenio Suarez with more intensity than any other team. These things were said about teams. The more intensity than any other team was literally the words that were used about the Cubs 2 off seasons ago whenever Shohei Ohtani was a free agent. People were saying that there was no other team in the league that was trying as hard as they possibly can to pursue Shohei Ohtani. He went to Los Angeles. That is the kind of thing, and it's the kind of thing that I see people try to throw back at me as a counterpoint. That is the agent tactic. That is the team tactic that officials within other organizations, it's not just the Diamondbacks, it's every team that does this in a possible trade scenario, they will leak information to national reporters who will then make it seem as though there are other teams that are closer than the team that is actually the closest. The Phillies will do whatever it takes to land Suarez. What are we talking about here? Like, are the Phillies going to open up a traveling circus and send them around the country? Are the Phillies gonna find a new and better use of reusable energy? Like, do whatever it takes. You just need to make a trade. And if they were doing whatever it takes, he'd be there right now. That's the other part of this, is that the Arizona Diamondbacks can kind of play everybody against each other, including teams against themselves, because the longer they wait, the more they figure they're going to get a better offer. But I digress. The fifth reason why I think that the Reds are going to acquire Eugenio Suárez eventually is because the Seattle Mariners already made their big trade with the Arizona Diamondbacks and Josh Naylor. Now, that doesn't mean that the Mariners can no longer negotiate with the Diamondbacks. In fact, quite the opposite. They could continue. The Mariners negotiated with the Reds multiple times, back in 2022. So that's not to say that they're completely out of the running, but it's clear that the Mariners saw the bidding war for Eugenio Suárez and decided to pivot. And they went with Naylor, who is a good power hitter, albeit not as good as Eugenio Suárez. Doesn't cost as much as Eugenio Suárez. And they got him for two prospects that weren't even in their top 10 of their organization rankings. So they got to feel pretty good about that. I don't think they're going to continue to pursue Suarez after that, although they can. But that is a big reason for me why I really think that the Reds end up with him. And the last one, the sixth reason, is the fact that the Reds are super willing to play Noelvi Marte in the outfield. In fact, he was shagging balls in center field during batting practice on Sunday. They are literally trying to figure out every other position they can use his athleticism and keep his bat in the lineup, because his bat has been pretty good in the short time that he's played this year. But there are so many of those reasons that are pointing me to being optimistic. I am 90% sure at this point that the Cincinnati Reds will acquire Eugenio Suárez before the trade deadline ends. You can quote me on that. I can probably be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I got a really good feeling, and everything is pointing me to I cannot get my mind off this track. The Reds are going to get him. So, who will it take? We've talked about it before, some possible offers. There's been some ones thrown around, but there's a recent one, and the Reds may have to put up one other prospect that we haven't talked about yet in the offer to get this deal done. If you're looking for the best way to monitor all of your money on one screen, that's monarchmoney.com. They've got your deposit accounts, your credit accounts, your investment accounts, all on one screen. That's one login to monitor your wealth. It's really helped me grow my portfolio, grow my personal wealth, because I see everything all in one spot. They help you track your spending. They help you set spending limits. Monarch Money is here for you to grow your money, because quite frankly, in this day and age, it's so easy to live paycheck to paycheck and not even understand where all the money is going. Monarch Money is going to help you out with that, and you only need one password to see it all. Check out monarchmoney.com today, and listeners of today's show are going to get 50% off your first year with promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. Start growing your wealth today with Monarch Money. Have you ever gone somewhere and been asked, when's the game start? Well, that's probably because you're repping your team loud and proud, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's Game Day Hue to help you be a little bit more subtle. Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. This is the hat right here. It is super stylish. Look at that. It's got the great Reds color there, and it's got a nice little, the white cord across the bill and all that great stuff. Very nice looking, stylish, but very subtle. And they've also got these great golf gloves. If you want to go out on the golf course and rep your team colors, again, Game Day Hue is going to help you rep your team colors in style everywhere you go. Right now, you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue.com. And again, the code is MLB15. The code even stacks on bundle deals. So now is the time to stock up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. Appreciate all our everydayers out there. If you're not an everydayer, you can become one by hitting that subscribe button, making us your first listen, your second listen, all the different listens. We're going to be with you all throughout this week leading up to the trade deadline with any news coming forth. And we're going to be with you all throughout the playoff run as well, because this has been a lot of fun. Like I said, Steve and I will be back Monday afternoon around lunchtime as we really dissect this Rays series and look forward. I got a question about Chase Burns that I really want to unpack, because I think there's a lot to talk about when it comes to him as he gets ready to make another start, this one against the Los Angeles Dodgers on Monday night. But that's coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast. Let's get back to this Eugenio Suárez deal, because I think that I'm 90% sure, and I promise you, I'm not making this up. This isn't like something where I'm just like, let's throw this up here for content. Like, I am very sure, based on everything that I have seen, and whether or not you've seen all those things as well is why I wanted to bring it forward to your attention, that I believe that Eugenio Suárez is going to be a Cincinnati Red by the end of this trade deadline at Thursday at 6 p.m. Now, something that I saw that was intriguing to me was another trade offer that might get the deal done. And I find this intriguing because it comes from Jim Bowden. And normally I do not agree with Jim Bowden's fake trades that he comes up with. They're usually ridiculous. And you might think that this one's ridiculous, but I do not. I think this is what gets it done. He said the Reds should offer Chase Petty, Cam Collier, and Adam Serwinowski. We talked about Chase Petty and Adam Serwinowski last week whenever the mutual interest article from C. Trent Rosecrans came up, because those were names that he mentioned in his article as well. So we have two of the three. Seems as though these are probably names that the Diamondbacks have almost all but accepted in a possible deal. The interesting part is Cam Collier, because I think there is a group of Reds fans right now that if you said that Cam Collier was involved in a deal, they would be mad about it. And they wouldn't necessarily care who the Reds were getting back. And I don't know that I am staunchly against them. I don't know that I have a huge point to really belabor on this, but I also don't think that Cam Collier is untouchable. Consider this for a minute, because Eugenio Suárez is the missing link in this lineup. He provides something that the Reds do not have a consistent threat to do, and that is hit home runs. I know Elly De La Cruz has done a nice job this year of hitting home runs. He hasn't hit one for a long time. That's not to say that he's been bad. He's been very, very good for a while now, and he has looked amazing all around. But the one spot in this lineup that is really lacking is the home run potential. And as I've said multiple times, and I said it incorrectly whenever I initially threw the stat out there, but since, and this is the correct timeline because I looked it up to make sure that I didn't mess this up, but since the All-Star break of 2024, there are only two players who have more home runs than Eugenio Suárez: Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. When you're compared with those in any capacity, that means you're pretty darn good. And Eugenio Suárez is pretty darn good. And if you have a chance to acquire that guy and add him to your lineup for the stretch run, you do it. Because I'm falling back on a quote that because I was reminded of the Johnny Cueto trade, and we talked a little bit about this past week, but I wrote an article over at SI.com for this, CincinnatiRedsTalk.com, about this. And looking back on the Johnny Cueto trade when he went to the Kansas City Royals, the Reds were lauded for the prospect capital that they got back. None of those guys panned out. But there was a quote from then Royals general manager Dayton Moore that really stuck with me. And the quote was this: "If you focus on what you're losing or giving up or trading away, you'll never make a deal." The Cincinnati Reds need to make a deal. The Cincinnati Reds need a Eugenio Suárez. They're one game out of a playoff spot currently as I record. Hopefully, Monday, things can flip around. They beat the Dodgers, Padres lose. I don't know if the Padres are playing or not, but if they do play and they lose, then the Reds are tied for a wild card spot. But the Reds are right in the middle of striking distance. They are not on the outskirts of striking distance. They are not within slam range of the playoffs. They are right there. And if you add to this lineup the one thing that it has been missing, a consistent home run threat in Eugenio Suárez, you're going to get him there. I think that you could make the argument that there's one more trade they need to make in a relief pitcher, and we'll talk about that this week, but I expect that that will happen. One of the other reasons that I did not get to, reasons why I'm bullish about the Reds making this trade, is because of everything that they've done this year up to this point. Consider the moves that they have made, and you tell me with a straight face that you believe the Reds, before they actually did the things, that you would have said that they would do them. Because I will tell you right now, I'm looking right into the camera, if you're listening on audio, so you just know, that I did not believe the Reds would sign Terry Francona as their next manager. I certainly didn't believe they would cut Jeimer Candelario with multiple years of guaranteed money still left on his deal. And I did not believe at all that Chase Burns was going to get called up as soon as he did. The reason that they did all three of those things to this point is because they see something in this group. They see something in the core of this team that they think they're there. They think that they're almost there. And Eugenio Suárez is another thing to get them over the edge. And I believe that Nick Krall will make that move. And so when I look at this trade offer, and so many people will probably be like, there is no way you can trade Cam Collier. That's a horrible idea. But you're also operating under the assumption that the Reds will absolutely not make an offer for a contract extension on Eugenio Suárez. Because he's the kind of guy, and I know that, you know, Reds country, and I kind of joined in on this a little bit, but Reds country did the whole like dreaming thing that if Kyle Schwarber were to become a free agent this offseason, that the Reds would sign him and make him their DH for the next 3-4 years, whatever it is. Why wouldn't you do that with Eugenio Suárez? I just mentioned that there's only two guys that have hit more home runs than Eugenio Suárez since the All-Star break of 2024, and not one of those names was Kyle Schwarber. I believe that if you're really going to build a solid team, obviously drafting and developing is a huge part of it. Free agents are a smaller part, but you have a much better chance of acquiring much better quality talent through trades than through free agents. Because why is a guy a free agent? Other than, you know, the Juan Sotos of the world that just want every single penny that they could possibly get, and they're well within their rights to do that. But what I'm saying is for the majority of players in the league, if they're a free agent, it's because their team was okay letting them become a free agent. Teams aren't necessarily okay with trading them. You've got to convince them that you're the right team for the deal. You put in Cam Collier with Chase Petty and Adam Serwinowski, the Reds will get that deal done. And I think that Nick Krall is going to do it. I think Nick Krall is going to get this done. I think that we will see Eugenio Suárez batting cleanup behind Elly De La Cruz in Bristol this Saturday. And that excites me just thinking about that. I got a little bit of chills right there, not going to lie, because I'm going to be down there. It's going to be a lot of fun. But that is the bat that they need. I am almost certain. You never say anything with 100% certainty until it actually happens, but I'm 90% certain that the Cincinnati Reds are going to trade for Eugenio Suárez. I'd love to hear your reasoning as to why, because there's a good chance that it's not going to convince me otherwise. But thank you so much for checking out this extra edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Like I said, Monday's episode will come up around noon with me and Steve breaking down the Rays sweep, looking ahead at Chase Burns, and a question that I have burning a hole in my brain about Chase Burns that we're going to discuss a lot on that show. Make sure you join us, and if you're not an everydayer, hit that subscribe button here on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting app, because we're on all of them out there. And I appreciate every single one of you for joining me here. You always know we're going to be Locked On Reds every single day.